Welcome, everybody, to the Dr. Leadership Lounge, where we have conversations with business leaders from all walks of life about how and why they are successful. Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Dr. Leadership Lounge. Man, I am stoked today. As everybody knows, I love the military and all aspects of it. And when I get introduced to somebody that has experience in the realm of serving others and protecting the freedoms of this country, I get really stoked about it. And today I'm very fortunate. I have Steve Koehler on the phone with us today. He is a retired Chief Master Sergeant from the Airforce and was a big part of the security forces. Some people call it the military police to give people kind of a realm of understanding there, a little bit different. But we got Steve on the show today. He's going to talk about his 20 plus years in the Air Force as part of the security forces. And Steve, I just want to welcome you to the show. How you doing?
Thanks, sir. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I'm doing great. You know, it's a Saturday morning. It's beautiful outside. At least it is here in North Carolina. So I just, again, honored that you would invite me to the show. It's great being here.
Absolutely. Now, you're rubbing in that North Carolina weather on me. I moved back to Des Moines, and I lived in North Carolina for years. And this time of year, I can say that my wife and I do miss the weather pattern a little bit. But we had a nice week. Well, I was in Boulder this week, actually, and it was in the low 60s. So it was great. And then it was in the low 50s here, but reality started coming back. It's still above freezing. We're still trying to shed 30 inches of snow from a couple weeks ago, which is highly unusual, but I miss that North Carolina weather. Well, I really appreciate you joining us today. And as I kind of said in the kickoff, we love having people that have served others as kind of a guiding light in their careers and in their lives. And I know you're recently retired from the security forces of the Air Force after 20 plus years and getting all the way to the rank of Chief Master Sergeant. But how I kind of like to start these things off a little bit is to just tell people a little bit about, kind of a grand scheme of what your military background looked like. You went in 20 plus years ago. What brings you to today? How did you get to today?
Okay, thanks for the question. So I entered the Air Force in 1992. So June of 1992, I had enlisted in the United States Air Force, and it's funny enough is that we talk about the ASVAB, which is like an entrance exam.
Yep.
Everyone talks about how easy it is, and military police security forces, the score, the minimum is not real high. And it's funny, people talk about, hey, we need to raise it higher, so we get the best crop, the best folks out there.
Yep.
And for me, I'm not ashamed to say it because I've been successful, but I failed too, just like everybody else. But I didn't meet the minimum standard, when I first came in, and I was just determined to come in. So I was like, well, I guess I need to hit the books a little bit because for me, short story, I'm not good at math. So I took the bare minimum in high school, which obviously our threshold for academics has changed throughout the years. But in the 90s, I just needed like basic math to graduate. And that was my short-term vision, is to graduate. So on my exam, there was a lot of math I hadn't done before.
That's
so
a
I didn't
tough
meet
one.
the standard, so I finally like, all right, I guess I need to take a pre-algebra class or do something, and I did. I'm like, okay, I think that's enough. So let me go back at it again. And so I nailed it the second time around.
Awesome.
And then obviously, like I said, I came in 1992 and I served for like just 30 years and 10 months. But an interesting fact, about me is I had a break in service. So
Did
came
you
in
say
1992,
30 years
like
and 10 months? I had written down 30.
What's that? 30 years plus, actually.
Wow. I apologize, man. I wrote the wrong number. Well, see, I'm not good at math either.
30 years,
Look at that.
It's actually more like 32 years.
Gotcha. I'm not good at math either, evidently. I wrote the wrong number down.
That's okay. So, 1992 is when I first came in, and it was called security police then. It's basically a hodgepodge mixture. What makes us different is it's a mixture of military police and infantry. So the Army has it separate. MOSs, but ours is kind of a mix, if you will. We don't do everything the infantry does, but we have some elements there. So my first base was Holloman. Well, let me back up. Our basic training for the Air Force, for those who don't know, is Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas.
Yep. Nice and hot in the summer. You went in June. I bet it was nice and cool.
You heard me mention June, right?
Yeah, exactly. As I just said, you went in June. I bet it was nice and cool in San Antonio.
Yeah. I mean, San Antonio in June. Oh man. I got spots in my low quarters where my shoes melted because we'd be doing drill on the pad out there. It's just hot. But I do remember Texas very well, being very very hot. I tell stories all the time about doing details down there when I was in basic training, and I can remember sweat just pouring so bad it was like a fountain, like someone had a little small fountain
Yep.
on the brim of my cap. I remember that very vividly. Some things we forget throughout our lives, but other things we don't. But yeah, very very hot. And our technical training, once we graduated basic training, is there at Lackland as well for security forces. So I just stayed down there. Where
Gotcha.
most people went off to different locations to go to their schools. The Army calls it AIT. But so I spent the next 8 weeks down there going through school to prepare me for security forces, my career, my MOS, if you will. And then after 8 weeks at Lackland of technical training, they sent me to Fort Dix, New Jersey, to train with the Army. So the Army trained what we call our air base ground defense, infantry-like tactics, how we protect. Sure. They taught us how to protect an air base, if you will, out in the field. Did that for about 3 weeks. And then, of course, we got some leave, went home. I'm from Springfield, Illinois, originally.
Home of Lincoln.
Go ahead.
Home of Lincoln, isn't it?
It is. It is, sir.
That's
Yes,
right.
sir. Yep.
Southern Illinois.
Land of Lincoln.
Land of Lincoln.
Actually,
that's right.
Abraham Lincoln's from my hometown.
That's great.
Springfield, Illinois.
Yeah.
So, which is pretty cool. But not much in Springfield these days, but I'm proud to call that my home.
The town peaked early. Yeah.
Go ahead.
The town peaked early with Lincoln.
Yeah, it did. It did. It's a blue collar town. Used to have a lot of industry there in Springfield, and a lot of them just costs were cheaper because Illinois taxes are kind of high. So I think they just moved elsewhere to save money. And just our industry pretty much left because we had like things like Pillsbury and Sangamo Electric and
Great
a watch
businesses.
company and Fiat Alice with Caterpillar.
Yeah.
So a lot of industry there, but they all left town. So it's not what it used to be. Now it's a major medical hub. So a lot of medical inside the area. But so I went home on leave for about 10 days. They give you 10 days when you're a new recruit to go back home if you're going to a stateside location. If you're going overseas, they give you 14 days, give you 2 weeks. So I took my 10 days, and then went to my first base, which I alluded to earlier, Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico. It's in a town called Alamogordo, New Mexico. Not much there, but it was my first base. And at that installation, I met my wife, Shannon, who I'm still married
that's
to.
awesome.
So we're married for 30 years.
Yeah. Now, was she in the military?
Was she in the security forces as well?
Okay, I was going to say, was she in the military too? Yeah.
And what's so awesome about the military is not only do you meet people, friends, and form lifelong relationships with people, but sometimes you meet spouses. So had I not entered the United States Air Force, had I not gone to Holloman, had she not gone to Holloman, we wouldn't have met. And to be honest with you, we'd probably be having this conversation because our mutual friend, Chris, is married to Jess, which Jess is my wife's friend.
Yeah,
so that's how
it's a small world.
Again, I guess you call it 6 degrees of separation type of stuff. But,
that's right.
Yeah, so that was my first base. I did 4 years there, and then the Air Force was downsizing. We're shifting from a Cold War mentality. I'm sure you remember that.
Yes, I do.
So we were shifting from a Cold War mentality. We were downsizing. A lot of bases shut down because we just didn't need them anymore across Europe, across the U.S. Basically, I was told, hey, you're going to either have to get reclassified on the position or get out. You cannot re-enlist as a security forces member.
Wow.
And at the same time, I got in some trouble as a young buck. Underage drinking is what I got in trouble with. So got in some trouble, and I almost didn't get to stay in. But I had a commander at the time that decided he was big and he prioritized second chances, and he gave me a second chance to recover. And when I got in trouble, I took my licks. I was held accountable, and I said, this is not what I'm about. I did not come this far, to do this.
That's not going to be your legacy.
I left because of those reasons. So
I
decided, that is never going to happen to me again. I was grateful and thankful, and I learned from that. Is like, hey, if you give people a second chance, a lot of times they'll bounce back. So that was one of those moments for me that I'm like, I've got to straighten up.
Here's what I would say about
that path.
Yeah.
So
if I can add one comment on that,
please.
You said two very important things there that I cover a lot on the show. You said you took your licks and you showed up with accountability. I think second chances are great when the person is accountable for screwing up the first time. That earns you the right for the second chance, right?
Yes, sir.
When people blame others or woe is me that our society is ripe with right now, someone else's fault, someone else take care of me, all the things that drive me nuts. I'm not a big fan of perpetuating that behavior, right? But when someone puts their thumb on the table and says, I screwed up, hit it with the hammer, then okay, let's move on, right? Experience comes from making mistakes, and you don't
Yes,
make
sir.
mistakes with experience. It's a vicious circle, right? So you showed up and you said, hey, I've made this mistake, and look at where it got you. So that's a great story. I just wanted to pause there because I think that's an important message.
No, thanks, sir. Yeah, it's something I convey because I share my story with a lot of our younger folks, and I've done it, military installation wide. I have no problem sharing that and the trouble I got into because obviously it shows about recovery,
Yep.
and obviously being given the tools that, hey, here's the standard, you violated the standard, here's what you need to do to improve yourself. We can apply that to pretty much everything,
Agreed.
but ownership is part of that. So
Yep.
not once when I got in trouble did I blame somebody else.
That's
Did
awesome.
I look at like, hey, my mom did this wrong when I was growing up? Now it was because we all have imperfect lives. I think I don't think everybody has a perfect life. I owned it. I was going to take and willing to take anything that came my way and move past it. And another thing that I learned out of that and that one time is my commander that disciplined me. I think in today's society, sometimes things are personal, some things are objective and business like. So he imposed the punishment. And then that night when I went back to work, he came out on what we call a post visit. He came
Yep.
out and I reported my post, saluted, rendered all did customs and the courtesies. And he talked to me like nothing ever happened.
He moved on.
Like it didn't happen. So again, that to me, I took that as that was his way of saying, hey, you did X. We held you accountable. Now it's time to move on.
We're good. We're
So, and
good.
I always
That's right.
appreciate that about him. And funny story, I actually ran into him 17 years after the fact.
Did he bring it up then?
And,
he goes, I just want you to know I'm still mad.
I mean, he's a commanding officer for hundreds and thousands of people.
Right.
And I caught him on a break because he was a retired colonel, a civilian working in security forces. And I said, sir, I approached him on a break. I said, sir, you don't remember me. But I'm only an E9, a chief today because of you. Because
Wow.
because what I didn't say is the legal office was recommending discharge.
Wow.
And he had told me, hey, here's what the legal office recommend. I'm going to do everything I can for you. I'd hate to see you discharged this early in the game. And obviously I responded saying, sir, this is not what I'm about. I'm better than this.
Yep.
I'll never let this happen again. Please just give me a chance. And then of course, like I said, he gave me that opportunity. But I mean, just one of those things that if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have spent a 30-year career in the Air Force. He would have had to cut it short very, very, very early. So if he didn't give me that chance to recover and that second opportunity, I wouldn't be here. So it was an awesome moment to be able to fast forward down the road 17 years and just thank the man who gave me the shot. But anyway, so that was that moment, my first enlistment. I think I left off bases were closing. I got in some trouble as an airman, so I didn't have the performance reports that warranted re-enlistment in the career field. Because in the Air Force, what they do is called a career job reservation. So there's certain periods during re-enlistment, depending on our end strength and whatnot,
Right.
that you have to request a chance to re-enlist, and that they have a priority list. When there's more people than what we have,
More people than jobs. Yeah, it's a different world. Yeah.
You get line basically, right? You request it, and then to find out where you're at in priority, they look at performance reports, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, I didn't have good performance reports, so I never got. I think 238 is like the highest I got. So they told me, hey, you have to reclassify another career field, another MOS, or get out. And I looked at all the openings. I'm like, I didn't like any of those. Very naive. I'm like, I protected, $1 million resources, warfighting resources. I got a secret clearance. I can do anything.
Right.
Had no knowledge. The internet wasn't in full force like it is today.
Sure.
And I got out and quickly learned that I'm like, ooh, this is a little bit tougher than I thought it would be because I had no college.
Yeah, life is not easy, man.
The military provides.
Yeah.
And the police department obviously is one of those first stops for, military policemen, security forces like myself.
Sure.
But they just done their hiring. They just done their hiring, and I'm like, okay, timing's everything, right? So, I lived in Illinois and North Carolina both. My wife's from North Carolina, so we gave Illinois a chance.
Yeah.
Moved back home. Things change. I think sometimes our memories get frozen in time, if you will. So, I was thinking, hey, high school was a blast. So I'll just pick up where I left off.
Yep.
I said I'll have to work. It doesn't work that way.
Now was
So
your
things
now
have
was
changed,
your
relationships change. I'm married now.
yeah was your wife
So
still in?
go ahead.
Was your wife still in at this point?
No, she had gotten out. So she got out about 2 years before
Okay.
I got out
Gotcha.
the
Gotcha.
first time.
Okay.
So yeah, moving back home, things were different, and I had bills, and man, when that paycheck stops coming, those
It's a
bills don't.
shock.
I can tell
Yeah.
you that.
Yep.
So, and we weren't as financially intelligent as we are today. So I had a lot of bills, and it's like, man, what do we got to do to make ends meet? So Illinois was not working out. Just timing's everything. So I looked at the wife and said, hey, how about North Carolina? What do you think about moving there? Maybe the opportunities are better. And we did. So I had worked in private law enforcement at a hospital, Moses Cone Hospital in Greensboro. I worked there for a little bit, and then I went to work Department of Corrections in Yanceyville, North Carolina.
Yep.
So worked those two jobs. Pay wasn't that great. I'm like, man, I just kind of envisioned, this would be a little bit different. I was in the Air National Guard the whole time, so I've not
Okay.
had any break in service.
Okay.
No full-time positions were opening up, but I was going down and doing my part-time gigs and doing my 2 weeks in the summer, and we did inspections, and I worked the Olympics at Atlanta in 1996.
Oh, that's cool.
Little stints like that.
Yep.
So did that in the Air National Guard, and we were getting ready to go down to Savannah, Georgia for an inspection. We were all geared up, ready to get on the C-130. It was combat load, so you got your weapons, got your gear, everything, and just water cooler talk. And someone had said, hey, did you hear the rumor? I'm like, oh, what's that? And they're like, oh man, they're begging security forces folks to come back in. I'm like, really? I'm like, that's weird, because they kicked a bunch of us out, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. Yeah, I remember thinking, I'm like, well, I'm not doing that great now financially. And I didn't really like my first 4 years, but at least, I got a chance to travel. I got
Steady,
some nice
great benefits. Yeah.
and I was making more money.
Yep.
Because if you, and you probably know this, but if you take what the military provides, both paycheck and all the benefits, it's a lot. It's more than you think.
It is. I have a nephew in the Navy.
That.
Yeah, I have a nephew in the Navy right now, and he's got a great apartment that they take care of. He gets his stipend or whatever you want to call it for living, and good pay, and he's got a sweet Mustang GT. He's jacking all up, and he's got life at Riley.
I
man.
mean, you can't beat. I mean,
yeah.
You'll hear arguments like, "Oh, they don't pay the military enough." I don't get into that piece. I tend to be a guy who's grateful for what he has.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, if you think about it, hey, here's your paycheck. Got that? Okay. Here's a housing allowance. Here's money for food. Here's free medical. Here's free dental.
Yep.
Free education. I mean, I got a master's degree. Not to get off course, but I mean, I got a master's degree free of charge.
That's awesome.
So to me, I was like, I knew that. I'm like, well, I didn't have the job satisfaction, if you will, but at least, I could, compensate, my family and take care of the family a little bit better than I am now.
Now, did you get that? Did you get that?
I said, hey, let me go. So I did the mission
Yep.
in Savannah, Georgia. And I said, when I get back, I'm going to talk to recruiters. So on the way home, because I was in the unit in Charlotte. That's where their National Guard unit was at. Yeah. And I drove back up to Greensboro. And when I came back, I'm like, let me stop and talk to this recruiter real quick. And I did. And I confirmed the rumor. It was true. And I said, hey, can we get started? And we got started. I gave her all my paperwork and stuff. And she's like, when would you like to report to your first base? And I'm like, thinking, man, the Air Force takes forever to do anything, so It's the military, right? It's, hurry up and wait, that type of stuff that we all hear about. And I said, well, immediately, hey, ASAP. So she's like, all right, I'll start working. So she went home I went home and she did her thing in the recruiting office, and she called me back in a week and said, hey, I got an assignment for you. And they had me reporting like in 9 days. I'm like, oh my goodness. I haven't even told my employer, that I'm leaving, and giving 2 weeks notice is very, very important to me.
Sure.
I like to end things on good terms.
That's right.
So I gave my 2 weeks notice, but I had to go on the whole on leave because I didn't have any leave. So I was like, well, I would rather go in the negative on leave and
stand up
to take
and do the right
leave
thing. That's
than
nice.
just to quit.
Yeah.
It's just not my style. So yeah, I got my first base and my number one choice because I couldn't go overseas since I was coming back in. Stateside was the only area that I could come in, and I picked Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado Springs, Colorado, which I've been there once. I drove through there and I just thought it was beautiful. You got Pikes Peak, you got the mountain range.
Oh yeah,
just a great place, just gorgeous. So I spent 2 years at Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado Springs, Colorado. After coming back in, and I was anxious to get overseas. I sat around, listened to all the non-commissioned officers, all the storytellers talk about overseas is awesome. The mission's great. You learn so much. Going to Oktoberfest and going to see all the sites
Oh
and
yeah,
looking
in
at
Germany.
history, and
Yep.
that just always thrilled me to listen. I'm like, man, I want to be able to do that one day, is tell stories like that and say, hey, I've been to
Seen the
places
world.
A, B, and
Yeah,
C.
seen the world.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I came in the Air Force in the first place. Two reasons, and some people might judge me for this, but I came in for a job,
Mm-hmm.
and I came in to travel. I didn't come in for patriotic reasons at all. I didn't come in to fight wars. I knew that comes with it, and I have fought in combat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I will continue to do so if called upon. But that's not why I came in. That wasn't my why.
Sure.
Obviously, some of my values and goals changed as I entered, but I came for a job and to travel. So I wanted to go overseas. So what I did was I volunteered to go to Korea.
Wow.
So it's a 12-month tour,
Mm-hmm.
Kunsan Air Base, South Korea. So a lot of history there. And what I found interesting about that is that there's no peace treaty in Korea, which many
Nope.
people know, but some don't.
Nope.
The
It's a
armistice
ceasefire. Yeah, an
still
armistice. That's
still
exactly
today,
right. Yep.
and the mission is real over there, and it heats up every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But so I did a year over there.
Now, did your wife
in the Air
travel? Did your
Force, if you
wife
do a
travel?
remote tour without the family, so you
Okay,
spend 12 to
without.
15
Okay.
months without your
Okay, got
family,
it.
they're called remote unaccompanied tours. You get almost like a base of preference afterwards, so that you almost get semi-guaranteed you'll get one of your 8 choices. It's not official ironclad guarantee, but it's
Under the
it's pretty
table, they're
firm that you're going
nodding
to
at
get
you.
where you want to
Yeah,
go. So I'm like,
yeah.
I want to go overseas. So after I did Korea, I put in for all these assignments, and I got Lodges Field, Azores, which is an island in
Wow.
the middle of the Atlantic, which was
Yep.
a pretty neat assignment. Not much to do, but it was a pretty cool assignment. The culture was great, being part of the Portuguese culture and learning from them.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent 2 years at Lodges Field, and then I did an assignment after that. I went to a place called Royal Air Force Station, Croughton,
Mm-hmm.
in the United Kingdom. It's probably about 20 minutes from Oxford.
Mm-hmm.
We had our daughter there. Me and the wife had our
Oh,
daughter Savannah
awesome.
there. She was born there, so she's dual citizen. And of course, got a chance to travel all over the place. Spent 4 years there in England, and then I'm like, hey, I think I want to go to Germany. So there's some Germany-based assignments on my list. So I requested to go to Germany. So I went to a place called Spangdahlem Air Base, Germany. Spent 4 years there, and I'll pause real quick. What's interesting is that obviously we all know about World War II.
Yep.
And my wife's grandfather, Mr. Kelly, he had fought in World War II. And the World War II vets, they're very good at connecting and staying in touch with each other. They have their reunions.
Yep.
I know a lot of them have perished, obviously due to age and health. But he had a book in the living room, and I was kind of going through it. He said I could read through it. And I actually saw on this book, there's a map in the very back just to talk about, where the battles were at.
Yeah.
And I saw where we're stationed at. And I'm like, sir, we live here right now, because it was during some time on leave that we looked at.
Yep.
And he's like, oh, really? He's like, I got shot in the butt in this place called Baden, and it's like 10 minutes from the base. I'm like, sir, we go there all the time. We don't go there to fight, obviously. We go there
Yeah.
to like food and to have some drinks. He's like, yeah, that's actually where I was shot. So I just thought that was a cool moment, in history, how things change, over time.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so we did Spangdahlem. I'll get back on track. So we
No
went to
worries. Take your
Spangdahlem
time.
Air Base, Germany for 4 years. And then the United Kingdom was open. I was trying to get to Italy. And the wife said, hey, let's put in for the UK, United Kingdom. So we did. So I got stationed at a place called Royal Air Force Station, Lakenheath, in United Kingdom.
Yep.
Spent 4 years there. My wife wanted to stay, so I put in for a place called Royal Air Force Station, Mildenhall, and which is basically across the street.
Yep.
It's close. It's nearby. Got there, and so when I was at Mildenhall, I'd been promoted to Chief Master Sergeant, and we had a guy that came in after me. He'd only been there for about 4 or 5 months, and he made chief. And there's only one position in each unit for a Chief Master Sergeant for any unit. Okay. There's not room for 2, so I volunteered to leave. So just because he had just gotten there, we'd spent a lot of time overseas in the United Kingdom, because at that moment I'd been overseas in Europe for 16 years.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It is, which was great. I loved it. But I didn't think it was fair to make him leave, after only being there for 4 months.
That's awesome.
I wanted him to have some of the joy that we've had, so because I think he just unpacked his house, so
yeah.
I was able to leave there, and I got thrown a bunch of assignments. They threw like Randolph Air Force Base in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
Dyess Air Force Base in Texas, Grand Forks Air Force Base in North Dakota, but bunch of bases. And I heard Francis E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne, Wyoming, in
Beautiful
which,
country.
it obviously everyone knows about Cheyenne, but
Mm-hmm.
old military installation, but it's a nuclear environment. So that is the base where they house, not at the base, but around the area,
Yep.
house nuclear missiles.
Yep.
Very hard duty. It's like night and day. It's like learning French or German, versus speaking English, just because it's just they do business different. No room for error.
I
Lots of
bet
people
not.
there. But what enticed me about that assignment is that up until that moment, I had led around 300 people. I'd been the lead person over
Yep.
300 people. I'm like, hey, I want to get better. I want to battle test myself. And I didn't really share too much, but I've done that my whole career. I just, if I had been, like a desk sergeant or a dispatcher somewhere, I wanted to go somewhere else and see if I could do it.
Yeah.
Right. So at FE Warren, they had 520 people. So they almost had double what I had before. So I'm like, I want to test myself. And I went in, um, again, not knowing how the nuclear environment works, and then knowing how to be a leader. But I didn't know how the nuclear environment works. But I went out being 10 times the chief master sergeant that I was coming in, and I did definitely get better, and I learned a lot. So
So
I
it was
spent
great. So it
two
was
and a half
great.
years
Yeah.
at
Great
Francis
experience
E.
there.
Warren Air Force
Yeah.
Base.
Yeah.
And while I was there, my commander had talked to the military installation commander and said, hey, unbeknownst to me, by the way, hey, this guy is pretty good. We think he should be a command chief, even though I didn't want to be. And a command chief is kind of like a command sergeant major. So a command chief in the Air Force is the primary advisor, senior advisor to the military installation commander on all matters that affect the enlisted force. Right?
Wow.
Pretty big deal.
Big job.
So just to kind of get some clarity, so to be a chief master on the Air Force, it's only by law it can only be 1% of the enlisted force.
Okay.
So it's 1%. So it's a pretty small.
So you're top 1%
To
already.
be a command chief is like the 1% of the 1%.
Wow.
If that makes sense. So I said, first of all, I appreciate being thought of that way. Second of all, I'm good. I like where I'm at. But I didn't say no. I've
Yeah.
always been a person that if someone asks me to do something that's not against my morals or values, I'm not going to say no.
Yep.
Especially if it has a job like that has a lot of impact. I call myself an impact player. Like if a job comes with a lot of impact, I'm down.
You're
for
in
that.
for it. That's
A
awesome.
lot of opportunity to take care of people, right? To advocate for people, to support people, and to affect change.
Yep.
So, and I knew I would learn a lot at the same time because this is a job that they take you out of your functional community and you're just a leader. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And now you're in a position where you have to learn because it was a C-17 F-22 fighter base.
Wow, that's awesome.
So you learn about mobility, the cargo aspects, logistics aspects, and the fighter aspects, strategic aspects, right? And I was in Hawaii, which not a bad deal. So not a bad deal being in Hawaii. There at Hickam, also in the Pacific Theater, right? So a lot of stuff going on in Pacific Theater that we see on the news about. So I knew I would learn a lot. Great opportunity. And I still talk to the military installation commander that hired me.
That's over there. That's great.
A relationship on that. And he's a C-17 pilot. So I've learned a lot from him. He now works for
an airline.
Delta. I get Delta and United mixed up. So the United or Delta he works for as a commercial pilot because he retired out of there. But I'm not great experience. I still have relationships with all those people that we work together there. And then I spent 2.5 years there. And then I decided, hey, I want to go back to my career field because I knew my time was getting short.
Yep.
Because in the Air Force and a lot of branches this way, not all of them, is that you can only as an E9, you could do a max of 30 years. All right. So at that point, I was sitting about 26, 27. I'm like, all right, my time's about to run out. Now, the only exception to that, sir, is if I were to go work for a general officer, they could extend me.
Gotcha.
But it all depends on the job.
Mm-hmm.
But I did want to end my career where I started,
in your field.
That's
great.
Within security forces.
Yeah.
So very important to me. I was like, all right, let me go back to security forces. What jobs are out there? So I put in for some positions. So I put in for 2 jobs. One was at Air Force Material Command, which is at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. The other was Air Combat Command. Air Combat Command is known as a warfighting command.
Yeah.
That's at Langley Air Force Base, Virginia. And I chose that because, again, it's always been one of those high ops tempo bases. A lot going on, very, very
Yeah.
busy. I love the busy
Yep.
because where busy comes is learning, development, and impact. So I applied for that position. And also, I told you I started, my first base was Holloman in New Mexico,
Yep.
where I'm at the Misses. That fell underneath at the time of Air Combat Command. Well, to go to Air Combat Command, the same command, to end it there, I'm like, man,
how cool
awesome
is that? Yeah.
To
Yeah.
one time be the most junior member in a command, and then when I go out, one of the most senior members.
Very cool.
In the command. Pretty cool, right? Pretty
Yeah,
surreal.
absolutely.
So I applied, got hired, and then I spent 2.5 years there at Langley. It was great. Had an awesome boss, greatest human being on the planet. So I just enjoyed myself and got a chance to take what I've learned outside the career field, inside of it, and then bring it back to my own specialty, and again, all those relationships that I had formed, and take care of people. So that's why it was very rewarding for me. But had my retirement ceremony December 15th. So very, very overwhelming with the feelings, because you're talking about something you've done for 30 years,
most of your life.
Two-thirds
of your life,
right? I
mean,
other than those jobs that I explained what I had when I was out.
Yep.
I worked at Bonanza, before I came in, which it's like a Ponderosa.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what Bonanza is.
That was my job.
I'm old enough to remember Bonanza.
What's that?
I'm old enough to remember Bonanza and Ponderosa and Shake Shack and
too, but no, it was great. Had a lot of great friends there. But it's just one of those surreal moments where you're like, man, I love this stuff still. So for me, what was hard, I wasn't ready to go.
Yeah.
I'm not. The pomp and circumstance always made me feel uncomfortable. I love the team dynamic. I love the people.
You were in it for other reasons.
To help people out, because I get fueled by people, by working around people. So I am not an introvert at all. I'm an extrovert.
Yep.
So now, and now there's a new term. I think it's called ambivert. Is where you're a little bit of both. But I am through and through an extrovert. So that's one of the things I knew that was going to be tough. But so a lot of folks showed up, said a lot of things that I had no idea they were going to say. Hit you in the feels, thank the family.
Yeah.
It was it was a great moment. And then of course I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm retired, but I'm still on active duty till 1 May. So in the military, if you got a bunch of leave and vacation time saved up, which I always do, I don't take a lot of vacation.
Yep.
You get to use it at the end.
Well, that's
terminal
nice.
leave is what they call it. So I had like 5 months of leave saved up. So, I get to be on active duty, till 1 May, full pay and benefits, which is kind of nice.
That's very nice. That's very nice.
So other than that, just kind of hanging out, keeping in touch, and just reflecting.
God bless
Sorry,
you.
I know that's a long drawn
No, man, but it's 30 minutes. Yeah, it's 30 minutes. So you spend a minute a year, so that's not long at all. So a lot of things there. One is so you and I spoke before, and I don't know if this came up or not, but my dad was a World War II veteran in the Navy, and he graduated on a Friday in June of '44, and 7 weeks later he's on a ship heading to the Philippines. Right, he was heading to basic the next day up in Michigan, and shipped over. He had an identical twin brother, and that was after the Sullivan Act, after the 5 boys from Iowa were all killed on the same ship, so they were separated, both in the Navy, and then they had an older brother in the Air Force. Actually the Army Air Corps, there was no Air Force yet, and was a B-25 bomber pilot, and actually had to crash land in the Soviet Union and held in an internment camp, and lived he bellied it into the beach like a pontoon boat, believe it or not, and they have pictures of it. They're all gone now, but the greatest generation for sure. So, one thing I take from a lot of your commentaries, you have a very servant's attitude, right? You think of others before you think of yourself. Like what you did for that gentleman in Germany, as an example, or excuse me, in the UK. You were there for a long period of time, and only one, chief master sergeant can be on base, and you foregoed your ego and your seniority, and said, let's let this gentleman have a shot at living here, and just lots of neat stories there. Chris said you're a hell of a good man, and I can tell just from our two conversations that holds true. So you go way back, and you getting out of high school, you said that was kind of your goal. Was there anybody that kind of influenced you on going into the military? Was there anything that guided you that way, or what kind of caused that to come about? Was it just you felt it was your only option, or?
So kind of a little bit of both, actually. So college was not an option for me financially.
Yep.
My parents, not super rich.
Yep.
My mom, she retires as a janitor, and she cleans houses right now for a living. She's got her own business.
God bless her.
My dad worked in the factory, so just it wasn't there financially. And I'll be honest, I had no desire to go to college.
I'll tell you what, I think the world's
in my
flipped
eyes,
on
I'm
this.
like, man, I barely made out of high school, man. I'm not a super smart guy.
Oh, I think you're smarter. I think you're smarter than you think.
What's that?
I think you're smart. I think you're smarter than you think. I was going to ask you jokingly here a minute ago.
But my dad was in the Marine Corps, so I'm a Marine Corps brat.
Okay.
So I was born at Camp Lejeune, which hopefully that plays out for me okay health-wise. I don't know if you've seen the little
I've seen all that.
Camp Lejeune, contaminated water. We'll see how that works out. but I digress. So military has been in my family. My dad was a Marine Corps. My grandpa World War II vet as well.
That's awesome.
Korean War. We got family members, Civil War back in the day. So yeah, just military's in our family.
That's wonderful.
Uncle, Army. So it was on the back of my mind. And I told my dad, I was like, Dad, I think I want to go in the Marine Corps. I want to follow your shoes. I want to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh no, you don't need to join the Marine Corps, son. Because he was a Marine. So he's like, you can join the Air Force. So I'm like, why the Air Force? He's like, because he was a Huey mechanic at Camp Lejeune there, and he used to fly into the Air Force bases all the time.
Yep.
And this is in the 70s. So he's like, their dining halls are better. They take care of their people better. They believe in education. So he just wanted the best for me, So he said, you can go in the Air Force. And then at the same time, I had two friends that had gone in the Air Force before me.
Okay.
And they're like, dude, you got to come in the Air Force, man. This is legit. They're like, after basic training and your technical training for your job, it's like a 9-to-5 job. I'm like, really? Like, yeah, it's legit. And I'm like, okay. What I didn't really digest is that they were in different specialties that I was. Because life as a security forces member, military police is 24/7.
Yeah, I was going to say it ain't 9 to 5. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not 9 to 5 at all. But again, I still love it. But yeah, so I just knew that I had to do something. I knew what I was doing is not working. I knew that, I was probably going to get some trouble if I kept going, just like most people do when they're younger. And I wanted to get out of the town. I was like, man, this is great, but I want to do something. I want to travel.
Go on.
So like I said, I wanted a good job. And I knew that the Air Force or the military would try me to do a job, and I could do it to the best of my ability. I did not plan on doing 30 years. I planned on, hey, I'm going to learn a craft, get good at it, and get a job after that. But
I think everybody.
That's really why I joined.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of goes into their first one that way. That's how I went into my first one, right? I mean, I didn't see 34 years ago where I'd be today when I took the job selling copiers door to door at 100% commission, right? I mean, it was like, I'm going to pad my resume. I'm going to learn some sales skills, and then I'll go off and get a real job in insurance or selling, airplanes or boats or whatever the heck it was going to be, medical equipment. Back in my day, it was, man, get into the pharmaceutical industry. Right?
Yeah.
Because it was came with a car and big dollars, and everybody in the pharmaceutical industry I knew was in the nicest house in the neighborhood. And man, how that has flipped too. That world's changed. But
yes, sir.
Well, that's interesting. So you had all sorts of influences around military and those types of things. What led you to that MOS, to that specialty in policing?
Yeah. It's kind of funny. So I wanted to go medical.
Gotcha.
And I kind of told this story at my retirement ceremony, worked in my comments, but I'm like, I want to go medical because it looks pretty laid back.
Yep.
It looks pretty legit. It's profitable. It's a great profession. You get to help people. I want to be an X-ray tech, so I told my recruiter that, because recruiter always asks, hey,
what's your desire?
What specialties do you want to do?
Yeah.
And so I'm waiting. For obviously I got my exam there. You're waiting to hear back on what openings to have. And he called me. He's like, hey, man, his name's Tech Sergeant Rick Smith. I still remember his name, Richard Smith. And he's like, I got a job for you. I'm like, oh, awesome. That's great news. What is it? He's like, security police. I'm like, security police? I remember when I heard that word, all I envisioned was like the security guards at the grocery stores with like a pistol, protecting
the
grocery
rent-a-cops.
store. And hey, that's a great profession. It's just not what I wanted. I'm like, man, I'm not trying to do all that. Remember I said medical. He's like, hey, that's all I got right now. So I said, no, I'm not doing it. I don't want that job. So I hung up the phone. He's like, all right, let me see what else I can get. My mom called me, and I'm very close to my mom, and she's like, Steven, your recruiter just called me and said you turned down the job. I'm like, I did. That's not what I would do, Mom. He's like, well, why don't you at least talk to him and see what he has to say? I'm like, oh, I was like, no, Mom, I don't want to. She's like, please, for me. I'm like, all right.
Oh, buddy.
So when it came to my mom and my grandmother, when they asked me to do
Oh,
something for them, I wasn't
anything in the
do
world for
it.
mom. That's right. Anything. I'm the same way.
I would put up the fight. Like, no, I don't want to do it. And they're like, for me, I'm like, all right. So I went in, and he told me more about the security police. And they explained, hey, this is law enforcement, it's security, it's military working dog, it's combat arms with weapons. And he showed me the video. The video got me, because the video showed back in the VHS days, right?
Oh, yeah.
Aging myself. It showed the law enforcement person, like in a blues uniform, on his knee helping a young girl out. Jumping out of helos, showed me the machine guns, showed me ATVs and stuff like that, horse patrols, because we used to do all that as well. K9, military working dog.
You touched it all. Yeah.
Aircraft, you're around aircraft. I'm like, oh man, that looks
legit.
That's not a grocery store security guy. That's different. So I'm like, I'm in. So he got me with the video, and the rest is history. But that led me to my decision for. I didn't ask for security police, believe me.
But that's how it came about.
They got me.
Mama made it happen. That's hysterical.
Yes, sir.
I was going to ask you earlier, just jokingly, you had talked about your scores and stuff, and I want to get this out. So you said you now have your master's. You got a free master's. Did you get that in math?
No. I tried to stay away from that. I got my master's in management with a focus in human resource management.
That's awesome. And I know you're looking for the listeners out there in the Southeast United States, or especially around the Carolinas. Steve is looking to get involved in the corporate world these days too. So great man, be a great asset for anybody's organization. But that's just awesome. So tell me, whenever I think of security forces and military police, so I have a neighbor. I'll step back 2 doors up. That was military police in the Vietnam era. So he had some unbelievable stories on going into bars and getting guys out of trouble, and in both Vietnam, and then also he was stationed in San Diego for a while. So Tijuana, back before it became what it is today, was a challenge. Do you have any just incredible stories about having to go in and pull our personnel out of some bad situations or anything like that?
Probably the closest that I have, just how it worked out is probably more so when folks are having a tough time, probably suicide.
Oh gosh, I don't mean to be. I was looking for a funny something.
Where they've cut themselves.
Oh man.
Stuff like that, or they've harmed themselves, or I come on someone who's taken their life. That's probably. I don't have any like fire or shootouts or anything like that. Obviously, I was in combat environments where we were being fired upon, but nothing like the fires and I'm rescuing someone from a car.
Well, I wasn't even thinking that. I was thinking,
car accidents.
Yeah, where I was going was little funny
where you
stories.
Make sure everyone's okay and you get them out of the car, but nothing that's terrible to that aspect. Mostly, fatalities that I've responded to, and then just folks that are in trouble. Or they're inebriated, and you're talking to them and trying to talk them down.
Yeah, well, I wasn't. I wasn't trying to find necessarily heavy combat stories, but just the funny ones where the fight broke out in the bar and you got to get the 8 guys out of there that are Shiloh. Then you bring up, suicide and things, and what a challenge to have to face. And God bless you for doing it, because there's a lot of people. PTSD is the real deal. There is no doubt, and there's a lot of stress in that. How did you deal with that? I mean, being around, you said, coming upon people that have taken their own life. Mm-hmm. Do you compartmentalize that, or how do you manage through that emotionally?
Well, basically, it's almost like you see on the TV shows. You wonder, like, why is this cop making jokes at this scene? And it seems insensitive, but you kind of have to program your mind to be numb to it.
Yeah, wow.
It's a coping mechanism, because if you allow yourself to be bothered by each case, I mean, it makes it harder.
You could never do it. Cases. Yeah, you could never do it.
I can only speak for myself, but it's something that you try to make yourself, you feel, but you try to make yourself numb to it.
Yeah, you have
where
to.
You can keep going.
Yeah,
that's just have to set that coping mechanism right. So I would tell you that a lot of the stuff that I encountered too, the serious stuff, is when I was out. So when I said I worked private law enforcement at Moses Cone Hospital in Greensboro,
yeah,
I was a mid shift guy. So we worked the ER,
Oh man,
and we saw lots of different stuff,
I bet you did.
inside that ER, and then we worked the morgue as well.
Oh man.
So I remember, so we had like basically the control log. So when someone would expire on one of the floors, we went with the nurses down to the floor. We opened the morgue up, and of course you could log them in, right? Identify and log them in, and you put them back in the back, for the medical examiner. I remember the first
Wow.
one I saw. I remember telling myself like, hey, if I'm going to be a police officer, I need to get used to this. So
Yep.
that's something I look forward to in a way. But I remember my first one, so it was an older gentleman, and I'm like, oh man, this person's never going to breathe again. So I just remember thinking like, man, that person
They're
lived
gone,
a long
gone.
life, obviously
Yeah.
never going to
Yeah.
breathe again. But
Yeah.
just to watch someone expire like that, it's tough. But to your question, you try to program your mind where it doesn't bother you. You try to get numb to it, and when you see it a lot over and over and over again, it's just one of those things that I guess you get used to, kind of
Yep.
like in a combat environment, your first mortar attack, your first rocket attack you have.
Oh yeah.
You're,
Shock, but
you're
you
up
learn
on
how
the
to
edge,
deal
right?
with it.
You're like, oh,
Right.
what do I do? I'm going. I need to go to the bunker, this, that, and the other. And I mean, after a few of them, it's almost like, you hear the dog barking next door.
Yeah.
You
It's
know, it's
crazy.
just one of those things where same thing. You just get numb and get used to it and adjust yourself on how that's going to work. But yeah, you kind of get numb to it or accept the fact that, hey, I'm in harm's way here. Something could happen, but you can't let it, deter you from doing what you have to do. So that's just how I've kind of gotten used to it over the years. I'm not saying it's healthy. It's coping mechanism.
Well, and everybody has to figure out the ways in which to do that, right? Otherwise,
Mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm.
you either have a coping mechanism or you can't cope, and the
Yes, sir.
second one is not a very good option. You talk about the first time you saw a body in the morgue. So, me too, as a young individual, got in
Mm-hmm.
trouble with a little bit of alcohol involvement one time, and I didn't get in any serious trouble. But one of the things was they wanted to prove a point. Is I got some community service, and I had to visit the morgue, and they showed an alcohol death, and it was a young person. You're sitting there, and the smells are all weird and never seen it, and they've got this guy, filleted open to pull out the cirrhosis liver,
Mm.
to show you, to say, hey, if you don't, handle this differently in life. And this guy was probably 45 years old, and
Yeah.
a bunch, it was a bunch of 19-year-olds. So the legal drinking age changed 60 days before I turned 19 to 21. So you had
Mm.
people that were your friends that were legal in the car, people that weren't legal because they were separated by, 60 days of date. And
Right.
there was a party, and I was underage. And, they write a ticket up, and you go, and you try to negotiate this thing not being on a permanent record and stuff. And they say, okay, we'll do that, but we're going to give you some community service, and we want you to visit the morgue and see what
Mm.
alcohol, can lead to. We were just a different society, right? There were repercussions, and there was accountability. And today we have none of it. And I wanted to ask you about this because you're a very accountable person.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of this? The way our laws are not being held to account these days, no accountability and no cash bail, and where the crime is going. How does that make you feel? Do you have opinions on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't agree. I don't care for it.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the premise behind it,
Sure,
but I think that people do what they're allowed to do.
that's exactly
Uh,
right. I think that there's intentions there. See, you and I have a lot of experience in life now, and you
mhm,
have a lot of
mhm,
younger people that want the world to be rainbows and unicorns. And the world
right.
is a very challenging place.
Hmm.
And it's funny, I had a conversation with my youngest daughter when she was graduating from college, and I'll get back on track here, but it ties into what we're talking about. And she
Hmm.
had just taken it was called Human Health or Society Health or something like that. And we were driving in a car, and it was three of her girlfriends from the back. They were in town visiting from North Carolina, going to a friend at the University of Iowa's birthday party. And I was driving them, and they were talking about this, and the Portland legalization of drugs came up in the Seattle thing. And I said, I think it's a big mistake. And my youngest daughter, who is very smart, but said, well, Dad, they do this because it keeps them from dying of over. The reason they're legalizing is you can get clean needles and everything. Is it helps society in the grand scheme because these people won't die. You'll just help them along. And I said, Let me ask you this. When a person has 3 drunk driving convictions, should we hand them bottles of Jack Daniels?
Hmm.
And she looked at me with her head tilt and she said, "What?" And I said, "I think that this is going to lead to bigger problems." Now we've seen what's happened there. The premise
Hmm.
is, well, yeah, let's try to help these people, but you don't help an addict by providing what they're addicted to. It just
Right.
at free realm. And now we've got these society I mean, these cities are gone. They're
Yeah.
gone. I travel all over the country. I saw San Francisco what it was, one of the most beautiful places in the world. I now see San Francisco what it is. It is one of the worst places on the planet
Mm.
because it's just dread and death everywhere because they don't have any accountability in it. So it's just, I was just saying, we have experience where it's not going to go like they hope it goes. Criminals are criminals, crime is crime, and if that starts to break down in society, we become nothing more than animals eating each other. You've got to have parameters and rules
Yeah.
of society, and anybody that thinks that that is not the case, just go spend a weekend on the streets in Portland or Seattle or whatever. Go, let them into your home if you think it's such a good idea, and nobody ever
Yeah,
wants to do
I
that.
agree. There's got to be some consequences with actions when they don't when they're not consistent with law
That's right.
or,
That's right.
or whatever.
That's
There's
right.
it's just going to get worse.
It's a
If
perpetual
we do
slide.
that, and then
Yep.
now you have another form of inequality. And inside my service, we started talking about disparities,
Mm-hmm.
and biases and
Mm-hmm.
military justice based on like race.
Sure.
And there was discussion about, hey, if someone comes from a different background, right, and they're trying to make better of themselves, does it make sense for us to discharge somebody just to put them back in that same situation?
Right.
Or, hey, is there a reason, for this behavior? And that I love that discussion, but at the same time, you can have that discussion, and there's some value in that. But same time, should the question I posed is that should someone who grew up with a white picket fence get harsher punishment?
That's right.
So I think when you're trying to, level the field a little bit, at the same time, you could be making it unlevel. Your whole objective might be, hey, we want to make this level, but
It's
then now
happening
you're,
today.
you're making it unlevel for others. So
That's right.
it's a very slippery slope. You got to be careful when you do that. But at the end of the day, I just think that, if the behavior is not consistent, you got to be held accountable, period.
I agree. You do not lower standards to the lowest common denominator to benefit and grow your society. It's no different than, it's what's happened in the education system in a lot of these big cities. They pass the problem on to the next teacher, passing people along because, well, we can't hold people back. It's not fair. It's not fair. Well, then what you get is 100% of the 12th graders that are graduating unable to read at a fifth grade level in
Right.
Baltimore, as an example, in downtown Chicago. 100% of
Yeah.
schools that cannot read and write. That's not giving them a better leg up. If you would hold them more accountable younger, and we've got cultural issues in this country. It's not race based, it's just overall cultural.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has become be famous on TikTok instead of put your head down and work hard and get there through other means. And
Yeah.
I talk about that a lot on the show. Is just work hard and be consistent and show up and be
Yep.
willing to help others and be giving. It's not what you have, it's what you give, and just be an overall good person, and good things are going to happen. And um, it's like the old saying that I used to hear a lot, that people are conservative because they're rich. Well, another way to look at it is conservative people grow wealth. The
Yeah.
conservatism actually leads to the outcome, not the outcome leads to what you believe in society, and a majority of the time. There are
Yeah.
always exceptions. There are always corners in any room of discussion, not the center of the room I'm talking about here, but it's just interesting. So I just wondered how you were looking at society these days with, first of all, the military is very regimented. There is accountability, there is discipline, and then you come
Mm-hmm.
out into the society, or you're watching it around us, and it's just like, I mean, you see the edges falling apart, and sooner or later we've got to make tough decisions, right?
Yep.
We need a mother or a father figure leading this country and bringing people back together and start holding people accountable. I don't know. It's just crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that I try to watch all the news agencies because
Yep.
nowadays,
Don't pull it from one. That's exactly
there's
right.
not
That's
one
right.
news agency that gives you the truth.
Agreed.
So you try to watch a little bit of both, and the truth's probably somewhere in the middle, is
Agreed.
how I describe it. But
Very much.
I think the immigrants that attacked the police officer was in New York City. I
Oh
think I
my
saw on the
God.
news the other day,
Anger. Ooh,
and then that they were out within a few hours. There might be a different story, but that's what I saw. So if
that is what
true,
happened.
that's unacceptable.
That
You
is.
know,
And
so,
he's flipping the finger and then he get on a bus
yeah,
and they're heading
yeah,
to California. You
and they can
know,
go on their own merry way.
yeah.
Just unacceptable. You
And if
know,
that would
when
have been,
folks
and
have done more minimal crimes and they're in confinement facilities for
well,
longer.
let's give
It
you an
just it
example.
doesn't equate to me. That it doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. But I'm big in accountability.
Yep.
I've been held accountable,
Yep.
and I moved on, and I think I just
Great
expect the
lesson.
same out of
Yeah.
everybody else. I think that's the curb behavior and protect people, and you form a quality to it at the same time. So
I
yeah,
agree.
that's my short thoughts on that.
Yeah. You agree. You know, you talk about that, the immigrants and beating up on the police officers. It's all on video. I mean, why are you letting them out for a court case? I mean, it's all on video. But meanwhile, we have a Marine that stepped in, somebody that was crazy and
Mm,
threatening people on the subway and
yeah,
subdues them in a legal hold and is sitting and, went to jail and had to post $100,000 worth of bail being a hero. I mean, the world is upside down right now.
yeah.
It's crazy. But so in all of these experiences that you have, I always ask people, so you flash back to Steve when he was 18, 19 years old. What would you tell your younger self from your perspectives today? If you were to, you have children, so you're trying to
Mhm.
give insight and direction and all those types of things, but what would you tell your younger self with your life experiences that you've had after 30 years in the military now?
It's something that I still contend with today. Is it don't sell yourself short.
Great point.
So and don't settle. So probably those two things. I still don't think I'm that great. I just do my job to the
You're
best of my
humble.
ability and
You're
take
humble.
care of
It's good.
folks around me, and the
Yep.
rest will take care of itself. And there's a lot of goodness to that, in my opinion.
Agreed.
'Cause I don't really worry myself with who's doing what, and I like to congratulate success and not hate on it.
That's
So,
awesome.
but when it comes to me, I don't think much, and I've been told my whole life still today that hey, don't sell yourself short. So that's probably the biggest thing for me. Because other than that, I mean, since I'm not a smart guy, I've always had to work hard. So my work ethic's always been intact. I come from a blue collar family, so it wouldn't be to be work harder because I've always done that. But yeah, probably just like I said, not sell yourself short. And if I were to tell my younger self something that I did what I'm about to say when I got older, but get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Oh, I use that all the time.
You
It's one of
know,
my
fight or
favorite
flight,
statements.
right? We go into flight or flight mode, and I
Yep.
wish when I was younger I would have done that more because you take away opportunity and learning more.
Hmm.
I did that when I was older because when you're older you're more comfortable, right?
That's
So
right.
I didn't start doing that till probably about 5 or 6 years ago. You know, and then I started thriving in it. I'm like, oh, I like this.
Yeah.
I like being uncomfortable. And I like having uncomfortable discussions too, because again, you challenge your audience, you get the most out of people, you learn from each other.
Yep.
Instead of clamming up and not giving your honest opinion, because you don't really learn anything when people do that, right?
That's exactly
But
right.
that's probably
Yeah.
the other thing that I would say when I was younger. Just do it when I'm younger versus wait till me
Wait
getting
until
older.
older. Yeah. So I have a term that I actually coined. Maybe it's been somewhere before, but this is 20 years
Hmm.
ago, and I call it carefrontation. Um,
Mm,
you, you care for others and you care for yourself, so you got to lean into those uncomfortable situations. It's
yeah.
not confrontation. It's not, I'm trying to be in a fight with you, but I care enough about you to help you stop that behavior, help you see that there's a problem here. The
Hmm.
other comment I would make is you're selling yourself short. You
Yeah.
are, Steve, because you have said about 4 times that you're not a smart guy, and I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. I
I
think you're
appreciate
I think you're a very smart guy. I think that you've learned a lot through experience. Anybody who has a master's is a smart guy,
it.
as long as it's not in like a stupid degree that you can't get a job with. Yours isn't good, but I think you're a very smart individual, and
Mhm.
you've shown it through everything you've done. Think of the life experiences and the people you've interacted with, and what you've done for this country, and top secret clearances, and working on military bases where there's nuclear
Mhm.
powers and weapons involved, and being responsible for tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, or even billions of dollars worth of assets at times. They don't entrust that to dummies. They
Mm.
entrust that to the well trained and the well defined mindsets that are required to be successful in those environments. So I don't think you sell yourself short on anything except that. I know you're being humble with that, but also I want you to know that I'm not buying
I appreciate the
it.
compliment.
And humility is a great thing to have, right? There's a thin line between self-confidence and cockiness, and you don't even want to
Yep.
straddle it. You want to be self-confident,
Right.
but being humble is a great attribute for people to learn. You also said something else. You're not into this. What others are doing. You love giving other people
Yeah.
credit and have. I chose almost 30 years ago to be a coach or a leader, not an individual
Mhm.
contributor, and it's because I love to high five others' successes. I love to see other people grow and sprout wings and whatever analogy I could use there. There's thousands of them, but that was a choice I made because I really love cheering on others, and I've had my due. I think I'm looked up to as somebody that's got pretty good game in the world of leadership. But if you have and you do, you can tell a servant's attitude and lean into others and help and give feedback and provide guidance and there's an old saying, feedback is a gift if you choose to accept it. There's
Hmm.
some people just clam up, and I can't believe they take it personally, right? It's not
Yeah.
a personal discussion. It's confrontation. It's feedback. It's how to get better because I've been down the road you're going down, or whatever might be the situation. So
Hmm.
it's just wonderful. If you were to give the top two or three things that you think the military gave to you that helped you in with leadership and responsibility and things. What comes to mind? The top two or three things that after 30 years you go back and go, man, they really gave me the golden egg in these areas.
Yeah, I would probably say goal setting. Look long term. That's something I didn't do. When I was younger, like I told you before, like I just want to graduate high school. I
Yeah,
remember my
yeah,
guidance counselor talking to me like, "Hey,
yeah.
what do you think about college and SATs and what do you want to do?" I'm like, "So I just want to graduate. So what do I need to do that?" So
Uh,
I probably would say, planning and goal setting.
that's awesome.
Look down the road. I would say perspective. So, for example, the younger me, I still cared for people around me, but I didn't look at it with the right lens, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So like if someone was cool, then I was cool.
Yep.
And I get along with pretty much everybody, but there's people I didn't care for. I would just shut them out.
Yep.
Right,
Guardrail.
I'm done with them, and there might
Yep.
become to a point where you got to cut the cord. But the military, being when they taught me how to be a leader, and I was put in supervisory positions. Hard to believe I've been a supervisor for like 25 years,
Isn't that
but
crazy?
and I look at them, and part of it's me, and part of it is the positions the military put me in. So it's a little bit of a hybrid approach. But I look at people as sons and daughters of somebody. So
It's awesome.
everybody is someone's son or daughter, and that has always gone into since I've been a leader. It has always gone into how I communicate with them, how I treat them.
Mutual
Like if my daughter
respect,
came
right?
in,
Mutual
like what I want
respect.
someone to do,
Yeah.
or what I want someone just to sell her out. I sure in the heck wouldn't want someone to sexually harass her
Hmm.
or to yell at her all the time or treat her like she doesn't matter. Or hey, if she's not looking right one day, ask what's going on because it's
Hmm.
easy to ignore.
That's right. It's
You,
a lot
you
easier.
know,
It's a lot easier.
it is. So as a leader, I've uncovered so many things in the work center that they didn't. The folks that I talked to didn't come out and say it, but I read nonverbals. It's taught me how to
Yep.
read nonverbals, how to communicate. When someone gives you an answer, how to kind of interpret like, oh, there's something there. Or when you ask two females a question, which actually happened, ask a question about, hey, I saw these nonverbals from you, what's going on? And they both look at each other before they respond. That the military taught me that means something.
Yep. That's right.
So something's going on there, and street smarts too a little bit. But
That's right.
the military also taught me how to communicate, with others. So it, now the leadership aspect, I mean, the military's paid for a lot of different education schools. One of my most cared for schools, I went to UNC, Keenan
Awesome.
Flagler Business School for enterprise and leadership, or excuse me, leadership enterprise. So learned a lot about people, there, and they ran us through some models and whatnot. But yeah, I would say leadership is probably the one thing they taught me. Now they taught me like strategic and corporate leadership, but I've always had a thirst and hunger for personnel leadership.
Yeah. The people side of it. That's right.
Yeah, yeah, the people side of it, right? So I've always liked that. So that's something that the military taught me. I mean, there's a ton of things, but those are some of my
Those are
probably,
your big rocks.
uh,
Yep.
yeah, yeah, the big rocks for me. Also, failure. It's okay to
Hmm.
fail.
That's right. Fail
Uh,
forward. Fail
that's how you learn.
forward. Yep.
And like when I talked about being a command chief before, so I interviewed for that position with I think four other locations before that. It didn't bother me because the military had already taught me like, hey, it's a gift, man. So if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Yep.
And something I've passed on that I've learned through my military career, just to appreciate greatness.
That's
So
awesome.
like when you look around the room and because I actually last time I said this, I was in Nebraska at a base, and I said, hey, they asked me for advice, and I said, hey, you guys got to learn how to appreciate greatness. So like when you go put in for a job, you got to understand and comprehend you're not the only good person, at the table.
Wow.
There's a lot of great people at the table too. And you have to respect and appreciate that. I think a lot of people don't do that. They're like, how could I not get promoted, or how could I not get hired? Or how come I don't get this opportunity? Well, you got to understand, you got a lot of powerhouses that you work with.
That's right.
They're there for a reason. So I think that some folks have trouble appreciating that. And I learned to appreciate that a long time ago. It's like, man, we got a lot of great people around.
There's an old saying.
So
There's an old saying. You're not as good as you think, or as bad as they say. You know,
yeah.
you're right in the middle.
It's funny you say that because we were doing a force management drill,
Yep.
Air Force, a few years back, where we were looking to basically rack and stack some of our junior members, which we don't usually do. And he had some town halls to prepare us for this.
Mm-hmm.
And he said something, and he was what we call the Force Support Squadron Commander, basically our lead HR person, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, listen, everyone thinks they have great records. So you bump me get somebody else's. And I'm like, and that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
And that was back in 2013, I think. So 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago. But yeah, it really resonated. I'm like, hey, he's so right. We got a lot of great people, around us. And sometimes I don't think people learn to appreciate that. We had I won't say names, but we had I had a dynamic in a work center where another person viewed me as competition, and
Yep.
I'm like,
Yep.
hey, and I actually liked this person. I'm like, I respected them. I thought they were great. And yeah, they looked at me as competition. So anytime I had success, that they would get mad.
They would
I
pow
would hear
down on it.
rumblings and
Yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm
Yep.
like, man, why does it got to be that way? Why can't we just respect and care for one another? And we were like friends.
Yep.
And then it just turned. But I was like, man, and that's the first time I encountered that personally.
There's
and I'm like, well, man, that's horrible.
Yeah.
But I know some people, operate that way, which human nature, I guess.
Yeah.
We
So
have to learn how to
you
treat each
got people that can have narcissistic behaviors and thought processes. Not like you, but similar to you, and just experiences. I'm a psychologist by experience, right? It's how do you get my job is to get more out of people than they themselves believe they have. And
Yeah.
my job is to find the traits that need to be accelerated and continued on in development, and then find the traits that need to be neutered and cut off in expansion. And keep the good, turn to great, flush the bad.
Yeah.
And that's how you perpetuate growth. And the world is full of people. So you talk about this person that's competitive and things. I say a lot, don't try to keep up with the Joneses. Don't grade yourself against others, because first of all, the Joneses are your enemies. That's how you get into debt. That's how you start worrying about things. The number of likes you have on a social media account mean nothing in this world.
Yeah.
Mean nothing in this world. What has that led to? A whole lot of our young ladies out there going to OnlyFans and doing soft porn to find their livelihoods. That isn't a good thing for our society.
Mm-hmm.
Now, God bless them. It's their body, whatever you want to say there, that's fine. But I'm telling you, that's not good for our society. There's not a good. The last chapter of that book is not going to be a good one. First of all, it's not a sustainable thing, because guess what happens over time if you're 100% dedicated to your looks? Is your value drops every day.
Yeah.
If you are worried about how other people see you or think about you, or what your looks are like, every day your value goes down. Now, if you concentrate on development of skills and leadership and being a good neighbor and those types, your value in society goes up every single day. So you pick which path you want to be on.
Yeah.
And that is your choice. And if you choose to do that, that's great. But our society is all about we, or excuse me, is all about me these days instead of about we. And the we is the village and the helping the neighbor and putting an arm around somebody in time of need and being thankful and giving to others. And man, life is such a gift if
It
you
is.
keep doing those things, and there's joys there. And when you see someone really, really find their spot, what a great thing.
Yeah.
Be happy for others. And I was so I'm doing these trainings nationally. That's where I saw Chris, our mutual friend, and
Hmm.
and I've got a bunch of superstars right out there, and trying to get them to understand that they don't have it all figured out. The cheese has moved. The how this world works has moved in our business. We have a very tenured sales force, which means to some people old. I'm not saying it that way. I'm saying a lot of experience, but a lot of experience in what we're not doing any longer. So
Hmm.
you're new in this. Don't think you got it all figured out, because what is happening today is not what you had all figured out last year. It's a different
Yeah.
world. So continuous development, continuous improvement, all those things are great messages, which you've shared today. If
Yeah.
I were to ask you a question on for future leaders and things, what do you think are some key statements or attributes around just leadership as a whole?
I think you hit it. Just now, so I say a lot to people because what they'll do is they'll look at their friends, their peers, or just other people, and look at their successes and use that as a measuring stick.
Yep.
And it's not. So one of the big things I say a lot is run your own race. And I ask them, I say, hey, what happens when you're running and you look back to see where everybody else is at?
Slow
Like,
down.
well, I look back and I can't see forward. I'm like, that's part of it. Because that's usually what they say.
Yep.
I lose track. I don't have a visual on what's in front of me. I'm like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's true.
Mm-hmm.
But you also slow down. So if you just run your own race, you can run a whole lot faster and a whole lot quicker time.
That's
So
awesome.
I said, focus on your race. The rest will take care of itself. And of course, we go over the main elements in a work center, what we need to accomplish. And I said, man, you'll be happy with yourself and everything around you, because then you'll know I gave it everything I got. And sometimes it's just not there.
Yep.
I told my daughter, a few years back, and I say this a lot as well, and it kind of goes into your question, is that because she came home. Well, one of the things I always tell her at school, I'm like, hey, just do your best. That's
Yep.
all I ask.
Yep.
If you fail, that's okay. So a few years back, she came home. She's like, Dad, I did what you said. I did my best, and I got a C. I'm like, that's okay. I said, here's the deal. Sometimes we fall short. Sometimes you give it your absolute best, 110% effort, and there's nothing else you could have done. But sometimes you just fall short. That's just part of the human race.
Yep.
It's part of life. So I tell folks sometimes, hey, sometimes you do fall short. You do everything perfect, but maybe someone does a little bit better,
Not
or
everybody can be
someone does a
Michael
little more
Jordan.
perfect,
Not everybody can be Mike
or things
Tyson.
things just don't work out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I say. And the other things I'll tell you is that I don't really buy, and this is controversial, I guess, a little bit, but you might disagree, but I don't really buy into the age gap discussion as far as millennialism and Gen X, Gen Z. I know there's differences, and I acknowledge that. Um, and what I notice on the older generation, like my crowd, is when you tell them, hey, the younger folks are a little bit smarter, right, academically,
Mm-hmm.
and they take offense, and I tell them, I said, I'm not saying that they're better in every way. I'm just saying I think they're more academically advanced than some of the older folks, because hey, that should be a good thing,
Yeah.
you know.
Knowledge has
You,
increased. Right. Our
it's,
knowledge as
I
society.
mean, we're
Right.
supposed to advance, right? Like if we're still
Right.
watching black and white TVs, that kind of sucks, I mean, we're supposed to advance and
That's right.
improve. So, for example, in school, I didn't do algebra at all because I opted out of it in high school. I
Yep.
mean, now, my daughter did it like in like junior high, I think.
Yeah. Seventh, eighth grade. Yeah.
So yeah, they're going to be more academic advanced and tech advanced than we are, right? So I acknowledge that. But I think a lot of people use it as a crutch for their shortfalls. So, for example, when an older person can't reach a younger person, they're like millennials. I think it's a crutch. So I think people are people, and what I try to tell everybody is that some things don't change. I think parts of the human nature does not change. I think there's people out there today like we were, is that they want to be the best versions of themselves.
Yep.
So I think that's what we all want to do. Now
Strive
that
for
might
that.
differ,
Hmm.
and some things do differ, but I think there's some human tendencies that are still there. People have feelings. Different things affect people differently. There's not one technique you use to motivate somebody, to inspire somebody, to nurture somebody. You, as a leader, you have to figure out what works for each person.
Everybody's
Right.
got a different firing pin. That's right.
That's where the skill. Right. That's what the
Yep.
skill comes in at.
Yep.
If everyone operated the same, or you just you know had a blanket policy or a blanket technique, it'd be easy.
Yep.
Skill comes in is getting to know people, getting to know their background, their values, how they grew up, what
Yep.
motivates them, what doesn't motivate them, and tailoring your leadership style to that. So that's what I try to tell folks is that get to know people, and some things don't change. Don't be so quick to chalk millennialism up and whatever else. Again, I just think that's a crutch. I was give example. We were doing what we call a first sergeant symposium at Hickam. So we were doing a week long course on how to take care of people, basically. Right? That's
Hmm.
what a first sergeant does.
Yep.
So we were in class and we had an airman panel, like a younger person panel. And I love the different panels where you have a panel, 3 or 4 folks, young, middle age, and then older.
Great
Just because you can
perspectives.
kind of learn. I
Right.
think we gravitate towards having the senior people in the room all the time, but I think there's value in hearing from the younger folks. Just to hear from their mouths. But
Yep.
the age thing came up, millennialism, Gen X, Gen Z, and she said something. I'm not saying that this young lady spoke for the whole millennial crowd, but she's like, I actually hate, because the question was to her, and let me back up. The question to her was from the crowd. An older person asked this question: Hey, how do we reach you millennials? How do we reach you guys? What does it take? And she's like, her response is that she's like, I actually hate when I'm called millennial. She's like, I got a name. She's like, I would expect a leader just to get to know me and what makes me tick, what motivates me, what I need, what I already know, and build upon that. Not just to be called a millennial and chalk me up.
That's a big group
I'm
to
like,
be lumped
I'm
together
like,
in. Yeah.
there it is. So I'm like, finally, because I had that thought. Again, it's nice when someone kind of semi validates that for you. But that's my challenge to leaders is just get to know your people. You know,
Situational leadership. Yep. And
you know.
it is important. The one thing I would say, I agree with what you're saying. The one thing I disagree with is, not disagree, a funny statement I'll make is millennials may be more advantaged from an education standpoint, but ask them to change a tire.
Mm. No, I'm with you. No,
No, I'm,
I'm
I'm
totally
just
with you. That's
joking.
not advanced. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not fun.
There's certain what has happened, and I'm joking with you. I agree with everything you just said. What happens over time is what they focus their time and attention to changes. So
Mm-hmm.
skills that we had to learn because that's what our life was encompassed in, changing a tire, having a change in electrical outlet, how
Mm-hmm.
to care for your own yard, how to fix your own car, has transitioned to when that people uh, not necessarily see it as beneath them, but that was no longer important to them growing up. So they count on
Yeah.
others to do it. So the best teams in the world have a diverse group of thought and background, and you will solve more problems that way if they are all willing to work together. Because all those different perspectives, I say often, when I go into a meeting room and I'm trying to solve problems with a large group, let's say there's 15 or 20 people in there, the A personalities that think they're awesome are going to suck all the wind out of that room. They're by
Hmm.
nature, that's who they are. And
Mm-hmm.
as a leader, what I try to do, sometimes well, sometimes not as well as I'd like to, is the quiet one in the room probably has the answer because they've been soaking it in and aren't
Yeah.
fixated on my way needs to be the way for the win. Like you said earlier, competitive nature. Everybody wants to say the idea first, but you've got these people that are fixated on their way is the only way, when in fact the quiet one in the room may have an excellent idea or an excellent perspective on how to handle a challenge, an opportunity, whatever you might be working on. So the key, you nailed it, is to get everyone involved and working together as people and not as a grand group, right? It's
Yes,
like
sir.
saying it's arbitrary. I hate Canadians. Oh, that's the dumbest thing ever. And I just picked
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
analogy. There's a lot of I have great people on my team that are Canadians. I've got some of the finest people in the world. Then there's others that I've met that are complete asses. And that
Yeah.
holds true of people where I'm from and everything else. I'm kind of meandering here with this example, but you can't put everybody in a box because you certainly wouldn't want that done for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I misspoke, so I might have used smarter, but what I meant, if I did say smarter, I meant more academically and
Oh,
tech
yeah, no, you said
advanced. Just
academic. No,
because
no, no. I
I
wasn't
think at the end of
challenging
the
it.
day,
No, no,
that's
no.
what I
Yeah.
like, because we want to
We
advance what
want
we
that to
teach our
happen.
folks, so
Nope.
they are
Yep.
more academically
Yep.
proficient, right? Um, but we all do what we're taught to do. So, for
That's right.
example, I grew up. I say single mom. I had some stepdads, but I didn't grow up and I wasn't raised by my dad.
Hmm.
So I'm not very mechanically inclined. I wasn't taught that way. So
That's right.
so folks who were taught how to, you can't just go to Home Depot and buy stuff. You have to build it yourself,
Yep.
or you have to fix your car yourself when
Yep.
it was a little more easier, right?
Yep. Can't do
Your
that
older folks
anymore.
can
That's
do
right.
that like the back of their hand.
Yep.
They can build their own house by themselves, just because again, that's just, that goes into how they were raised and came up. So we all do what we're raised to do. And I agree with you. I have a friend who's got a leadership business. He's got it's called Courageous Leadership Alliance.
Yeah.
So Todd Simmons. So he said something that always resonated with me. He's got a lot of great sayings, and he had told me that, and I heard him talk, and he's like, listen, we're not into the gold watch generation any longer. And I listened to what he said. He's like, what I mean by that is that, our parents, and even us to a degree, uh, what right looks like is you work for a company 30 years, get your gold watch, retire. That's what right looks like. You've lived a good life. He's like, some of our younger folks, man, that's not what they like. They'll work somewhere for 3 years and they'll be happy and content as all get out. They just want to do something different, so they'll quit and go
Yep.
somewhere else.
7, 8 jobs in a career. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So that, I mean,
Yep.
for us, having that many jobs, like, makes you look bad. Like you can't commit to a company, but that's just not our generation today. Again, I acknowledge that there's differences
Yep.
in that aspect, but
Yep.
when it comes to leadership, I think things that are pure and sincere in the human form, that it's not easily
Relationships.
chalked up
Yep.
in the gender gaps,
Yep. I
you
agree.
know, and whatnot. So that's I wanted to kind of to say that, but yeah, Mr. Simmons, I was like, that's good. And I remember when I was having trouble with this person that viewed me as a competition, and I'm a communicator. Like, if someone's got an issue with me, I'm like,
I'll
let's
walk
talk
right
it
up
out.
to him. Yeah.
And he gave me some advice, and he made saying, he's like, hey man, here's what you have to acknowledge and understand. People that can't stand on their own 2 feet stand on the toes of others. I'm
Wow.
like, oh man, that's good. That's a good little gem. So
Yep.
just having that is helpful, to understand, and then also getting back to, things you picked up from courses and the military. Understanding different team dynamics, as far as, there's your thinkers, right? Otherwise
Mm-hmm.
known as creators, and then there's your executors. So I'm what you would call an executor.
Mm-hmm.
And understand there's definitions of different people and what they bring to the table helps with understanding of one another. So, like, there's a term of a creator that we use. It's called good idea fairy, right? That's more of a negative term. But the creators of the good idea fairies will get frustrated with the executors when things aren't moving fast enough,
That's right.
because they've got all these great ideas. They're piping in, right? They're piping in. Like, what was taking us so long? But just understanding dynamics like that from a leadership perspective helps.
Yeah.
And understanding, you know what I mean? And not to, I didn't want to get off track, but it just
No, no,
popped in
no.
my
And no,
head
it's great
when
stuff. Those curators,
yeah,
creators, excuse me, that you're talking about. If they don't have enough sense of operationally what your company has the capability to do or not to do, it can seem like a great idea, but it could be a terrible idea because it can't be
correct.
operationalized.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I deal with that every single day.
Mm,
It's real easy
yeah.
to say, well, we ought to do this everywhere. Well, we can't do that because of these 47 reasons. And you
Yeah.
can want it and wish it all you want, but
Yeah.
unless we change the entire operation of the entire organization, or a great idea that has collateral impacts that those people don't see because they're
Yeah.
myopic on their perspective. Again, back to the perspective of others. But well, this has been great. I want to open it up for you for any kind of final comments. We're bumping up on time. I told you 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And do you have any kind of final words of wisdom or things for contemplation that you wanted to share with the audience before we part up today?
Well, thanks for that opportunity. I mean, there's just, when you talk leadership and experience, there's just so much, right? So
Oh
trying to
man.
cage my thoughts a little bit.
Yep.
I just think as you're trying to develop the person you want to be, or you want to, maximize your full potential. I think a couple things: you have to give yourself grace,
Wow.
give yourself time, And if you don't perform like you think you should, have the self reflection process in place where like, hey, I didn't. I do this all the time. I didn't do that like I wanted to. What should I have done? Kind of self reflect a little bit and
Yep.
process and not make that mistake again. But just give yourself grace, understand those around you and how they operate. You know, the other thing that I would say is I'll try to put this gracefully, speaking of grace, is that sometimes you should do more time listening than talking.
Two ears and
Um,
one mouth. Use them in proportion. That's right.
yeah, and because a lot of folks will say, "Hey, I'm listening," right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're not listening to understand; they're listening to respond.
Yep.
Uh, so listen to understand because it goes a long way. Hey, you probably learn some things just by listening to those around you. And sometimes you might have a thought. This happens all the time with me. So you'll have a thought, but I don't talk until I think it's time.
Yep.
So I want to know what you have to say first, because a lot of times you don't have to say it. Somebody already said it. I don't know how many times you've had that, in a staff meeting, but or just talking to people is like you have a thought on what you want to say, but hey, someone already says it, and that's twofold. A, the message has been sent, right?
Yep.
B, your team has already conveyed that message. It doesn't have to be from the boss
Yep.
or you in that leadership position. So I would say, listen to understand versus listening to respond. And again, I think that goes a long way. I had I think I told you the story earlier about the command chief side.
Yep.
I asked that military installation commander, I'm like, sir, why me? Because I was not a big name. I didn't hit the speaking circuit. I stuck to my nose the grindstone for my unit and worked and took care of the people that I was charged to take care of. And he mentioned something that he said, hey, you have what I call temperate demeanor. I'm like, sir,
Help
what
me
do
out
you
with
mean?
that one. Yeah.
Yeah. What's that?
I said, help me out with that one. What do you mean there,
Yeah.
sir? Yeah.
Yeah. So he's like, I said, what do you mean, sir? And he's like, well, I noticed in your staff meetings that you don't talk a lot. You make eye contact with everybody, you're listening. He's like, but when you do talk, everyone should listen. I'm like, oh, sir, I appreciate the compliment. He's like, what you're doing though is that you're not just running your mouth.
Yep.
You're listening to what he has to say, and then you have some. When you do talk, you have something of value to say. And I think we've all worked with folks who talk just to talk.
Yep.
Don't say much, or they'll just repeat what somebody else already said.
Yep. Yep. They just want to be heard.
So,
Yeah.
just again, it just gets back to I just think we need to spend more time listening to learn from others, to understand others better. And again, it doesn't need to be said if somebody already said it.
That's awesome.
So that's what I would add. And then the last thing I'll say, just to kind of shorten the stuff, because there's a ton of stuff you could say, right? We talked
Yep.
a lot today. Is that just look at whether it's customers, our workmates, look at those as sons and daughters of somebody, or look at those as your siblings, right? So you wouldn't talk to your sibling a certain way. Why would you do it to someone you work with in a professional organization?
Great.
So I think that goes a long way, whether you're talking about equal opportunity, discrimination, disparities, sexual harassment, inappropriate language, whatever the case may be. I think if we looked at each other as our siblings and give them the proper respect, I think that the rest will take care of itself. We wouldn't have to have big investigations and removals and stuff like that if we kind of did that a little bit better.
I agree.
But yeah, that's kind of, I guess, my parting shot. And finally, I'll say, hey, thank you so much for inviting me today. It's a true honor, seriously.
Oh,
True honor just
no, the
to be
honors.
invited.
Yeah.
I had a blast, but thank you so much.
Oh, the honor's all mine. And you've nailed it. You're a smart guy. First and foremost, thank you for your service, your wife's service, what you've done to sign up to put your life on the line. And I know it wasn't every single day, but that is in the fine print. That you are going to be in some tough situations, and I learned a lot from you too. Some great feedback and hearing about your history. Again, today we wanted to welcome Steve Koehler, retired Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force Security Forces, and a very, very good man. So, Steve, thanks so much. We appreciate you joining the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.